Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. We are back with Dr. Mamiko Odegard. So excited she's joining us here again as a psychologist, relationship therapist, best-selling author, and so much more. Dr. Mamiko, welcome back. How are you today?
Oh, thank you so much for that warm welcome. I'm thrilled to be back over here and eager to share my message.
I love it because, we learned a lot last week. And if you missed the show, you got to watch it. But, it was about why we need to start with ourselves first, right? Real self-care. And you mentioned that the quality of our relationships with ourselves determines the quality of healthy or unhealthy relationships with ourselves and others in our lives. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that? Tell us, just
yes,
a little
that's
recap.
Exactly right, Jill, because what we find are partners that are the mirror of what we're missing. And so we keep repeating the past unfinished business, if you were, as it is. And so the one that sticks with us and we get attracted to could be somebody that repeats our hurt emotionally, physically, mentally, and keeps us stuck in low self-esteem, self-loathing, insecurities, and self-defeating behaviors. And I'm sure that your listeners are eager to learn, okay, so what do we do? How do we become our best selves, which is what this whole podcast is about.
Beautiful. And thank you so much. We're excited that you're back as such an expert, as a pioneer in your field. And again, congratulations on being our Professional of the Year. We are thrilled to have you here. Let's talk a little bit about how and where do we really start to create that person or relationships that we so intensely desire. How can we help ourselves to help everything in general?
Well, there's really an easy formula that I've been using for probably close to 30 years with just an incredible 100% success rate, if you can believe this. And that is whether I work with an individual or with a couple, I start with an exercise that I call getting to know you. And getting to know you is really finding out about each person's family background. And we start with the parents as an example, oftentimes with the father and then down to the mother and then whoever is the oldest child. And I have each client, even if they're a couple, describe their family characteristics and personality traits. And then we begin to do this for each and every person so that what comes about is a pattern, a network of how that person, that client, or that couple became the persons that they are. And then from there, I can really go through specific strategies that really address the pain and the hurt and the shortcomings and the patterns that are unhealthy, that they think are normal. And so this relationship gives me more information than any sort of psychological assessment. And that's why I've been so gung-ho on this, because I really get to know the essence of the person. They're not categorized in different settings and labeled, but instead I get to know each person and where the struggles really come from.
And some of these struggles are from childhood, from past relationship, from past, there's a lot, right? Is there a commonality that you see a lot of?
Because what happens is that as I go through, I'm really researching as to where the pain and hurt are coming from, and it's usually from trauma. And so I want to give you some examples of trauma. And in fact, what's truly, truly alarming is that the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration estimates that 2/3 of children experience at least one traumatic event by the time they're 16. So can you imagine a young child being exposed to loud arguments and how stressful that must be, where the parents are screaming, yelling, name calling, swearing, and it could be with them, it could be with another child, it could be
Yeah.
with the husband and wife or the partners. And especially if there's physical violence, that adds to the vulnerability and unpredictability and the fear, because as a young child, you can't do anything to stop this. And in fact, I've had so many instances of children, both male and female, when the father especially starts getting physical and starts hurting the mother, then they will actually come in as the rescuer and try to change that dynamic. And then sometimes that happens where the fighting goes down, but other times it's like the father will just push the child away, and that keeps accelerating the anger and the fear that something terrible is going to happen. So that going back to the substance abuse and mental health services, then what they realized is that this begins to affect people psychologically, physically, emotionally, and there might be sexual abuse. And sometimes it's not because the parents or the caregivers are so violent. Sometimes it's caused by neglect. And neglect is when they don't pay attention to the child and the child's needs. There was a study many, many years ago when we started becoming aware of this and the impact of neglect. There were kids in what they were called the foundling homes or the orphanages. And the kids were left in their cribs all day long, up until they were maybe a year old or so, when they began to be more rambunctious and trying to climb out and all that. And nobody really attended to them, fed them, on an as needed basis. They didn't try to soothe them and pick them up when these kids were crying. And so the kids then internalized the trauma because they were feeling abandoned. They were feeling, uncertain about their caregivers. And so these kids then grow up, number one, if you ever talk to anybody or reach out to anybody and try to give a child or an adult a hug, they're as stiff as a board. It's like putting your arms around a tree or something, because they begin to feel disconnected from these individuals. They begin to develop that mistrust of others, that the environment is really a hostile place. It's not there to meet their needs. And so if you look ahead to relationships, then you begin to see why certain people, kids, grow up and they have relationship difficulties. They don't know how to communicate their feelings. They don't know how to resolve differences. They don't even know how to start the basic friendships. So I'm just saying that this is a horrible thing, that we have to be aware that, by the age of 16, that 2/3 of these kids, of any kids, at least in the westernized countries, then are experiencing trauma, and then that gets exposed and layered with adult life. And if I could say one more thing about
Say
that.
whatever you want to say. I love listening to you. You're so full of information that's so helpful to all of us.
Okay, great. Thank you for that encouragement. But anyway, I just want your listeners to know that in 1991, there was a study by Dr. Fellini, who was the lead researcher, and Kaiser Permanente, which is a huge HMO. Well, they examined 7 adverse childhood experiences, and they did a completed questionnaire. So the first was psychological, where there's blaming, there's unrealistic expectations, there's put downs, there's name calling, so forth. And then there's physical, where there's repeated punishment that could be unpredictable and intense. And then also the sexual abuse, such as molest and rape, would take place, as well as violence against the mother that I had mentioned. And then living with a household member who had chemical dependency, that begins to affect the child because that's how the child then learns to deal with problems. Well, they're going to smoke, they're going to drink, they're going to use drugs, that sort of thing. And then if there is someone in the family that is mentally ill or suicidal, then the child sometimes becomes like the adult and has to
Yeah.
protect, take care of that person. And then things are really damaged. Number seven, in terms of adverse experiences, when a person in the family is incarcerated. And you
Yeah.
can imagine the shame and the guilt and the loathing that
Yeah.
begins to take place within the individual when you have a mother or father or both that are incarcerated.
Oh,
So I'm
yeah.
saying to you that, you know, half of the people in Fellini's study endorsed at least one trauma, which is alarming of these 9,500 people that responded. And then at least a quarter of them reported two or more. So there were multiple traumas. So you can, and the important part of Fellini's study is that as we grow up to be adults, there are increased risks for adverse behaviors such as chemical dependency, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and importantly, medical diseases, lung disease, heart disease, cancer, STD. Yes, sexually transmitted diseases, because if you're not really loved and cherished, it makes it easier for you to just look for love elsewhere. And one way that people mistakenly think about love is to have sex with somebody else, and so there's all kinds of headaches, fractures. And so not only are there emotional effects, there are the physical effects and enhanced chances of some serious diseases occurring in the future when there's been one or more cases, episodes of trauma.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Uh, wow. You have so much information, and I love hearing you. And you are just so, you're saving a lot of people, not only relationships, but themselves, right? Explain that to me because that's what you're doing. And I know you love the work you do, and you clearly are so passionate about helping. And we are here talking to Dr. Mamiko. I don't know if you are just tuning in. Dr. Odegard, our professional of the year. Just want to remind everyone, as an amazing person who she is, a psychologist, relationship therapist, author, and so much more. She's joining us here live today on the show, and we're talking more about, creating, the better you, the better me, the better you, and the better us, because that's going to only help you attract that better person in your life. And yes, we've all had some family trauma, all different things, but it's just fascinating to me that you can heal from this, right? I have, by you talking, I'm going back to my childhood and what happened with my parents. And it was a bad relationship. And I saw a lot of cursing, of fighting, a lot of cops, a lot of abuse. And I look at myself at 47, I say, well, this is probably why I'm still single, why I still don't trust men. Even though I feel like I'm fine, I guess I'm not. But like, there's so much trauma, and it's okay to have trauma because we're not alone, right? I don't want to start crying, but it's
Oh,
so
that's
true.
right.
Thank you.
Exactly. You
Yeah,
you are not alone
thank
because
you.
almost all of us at one time or another has experienced trauma. And even when we come from loving, healthy families, trauma could happen. So let me give you an example in terms of an African American, or like myself, when I came to the US from Japan. You know, my family, like yours, Jill, wasn't the healthiest. In fact, it was very dysfunctional in many ways. But what kind of added to that and to my shame and, low self-esteem was the fact that kids bullied me and they called me names. And that went on not only from the time that I entered the US and began to understand what they were doing. And even if I didn't understand at the very beginning, I could tell by their gestures as they made these sorts of gestures and taunted me. So this is something that I want you to know went on all during the time that I was growing up. And it followed me. Even, and, you know, to some degree, this was a slight bit of trauma because when I got older and started dating, because I had the communication skills, I had the deep friendships and all that, I was widely and deeply accepted by my peers. But when it came to dating, I, as an Asian person, wasn't good enough for the parents' son, especially the mother, disapproved of me. And so I want you to know that we are all in this together to become healthier. And if I could, I'd like to give you an example of a VIP day that I did this weekend because the results were miraculous. And we did this all in 9 hours, believe it or not.
Thank you so much. Well, let's continue to talk a little bit about, how we can change and what's the best way to do this to really change our behaviors. And wow, and how are you working with people to do this? I mean, obviously you gotta get to know them. But it's
So
possible.
let me give you an example with this case that I worked with this weekend. Let's just call them Bob and Mary, right? And so this couple struggled with communication, resolving differences, and they had issues with trust and also didn't know how to rebuild that love and intimacy. They felt really stuck and they were becoming more and more distant. And so this couple had never really thought about the past and their family experiences and how that could impact their current relationship. And so what was really interesting is that the wife, or excuse me, the female went first, and she never knew her father because he had completely disappeared from the mother's life even before she was born. So she didn't have any pictures of him. She didn't really know anything about his personality, his characteristics, and so forth. And but what she did have that was going for her is that she had a very kind and caring mother and grandmother that she lived with. Unfortunately, neither the grandmother or mother would really show her physical affection or have the verbal affection of I love you, you are such an incredible child, we are so proud of you, or I'm so proud of you. She didn't ever hear these things. And so can you imagine going through life, and so she's doing the best that she can. She thinks this is all normal. And that normal, I really want to stress because what we grow up with, that's what becomes normal for us. And so, we tend to follow almost like a movie script that's been written out for us. And it's only when we're enlightened that we can change that script and the outcomes. So going back to this Mary, then, in order to connect with others more deeply and to make sure that she didn't do anything to rock the boat with grandma and with mom, she became a people pleaser. And, that's very common when there's dysfunction in the family, that you have one child at least who tries to be this perfectionist, who doesn't want to do anything that would gain attention or could cause any more fighting, especially when there's been, repeated arguments in the family. And so then, she began to realize after I talked with her and talked with them and gave them both my impressions that she had a deep fear of abandonment. So she would allow herself to get so close, but not, where she would be so connected with someone. And the other thing, too, is that she'd been looking for love all her life. And when she heard these two things, she just broke into tears. And, when I asked her after about the first half day as to what was most valuable for her, this is what she pointed to, because now she could really understand where she was coming from, why she was the way she was, but also how she could begin to accept and love herself more, that she was doing the best that she could, under these circumstances. And so, interestingly enough, with Bob, he was raised in a family where the father had a military background. And so his dad was often angry. He was uncommunicative. He wasn't demonstrative either, physically or verbally. And so it was really interesting that neither of his parents engaged in activities with Bob. And so Bob kind of just went through life raising himself, and he began to do his own thing, which really got him into trouble later on because he didn't communicate that. And especially in this relationship with Mary, he wasn't communicating really important decisions and just taking action. And she would find out and would be really so upset, which is where the mistrust came in. So I just want you to know that I was truly, truly amazed and so proud of this couple because within the 9 hours that we spent together, I taught them how to start a conversation so that the other person didn't feel defensive but could be open and honest. And then I taught the person who was listening to listen for three things: to listen, to hear, to intellectually understand, and the third is to have greater compassion and heart. And so they went through this flawlessly. Here's a couple. Imagine this, where nobody ever talked about the deepest feelings. And so I had to actually give them a cheat sheet so that they could see that anger and frustration were at the top, but then there were so many layers of feelings of pain and hurt and their own personal fears that they were carrying. And so they began to really empty out their bucket of feelings, and they just looked at themselves. They apologized. Each accepted the apology and made amends. And they also, made a direct request to each other as to how they were going to behave, what actions they were going to follow, what agreements in the future, so that they wouldn't ever have these conflicts. And so at the end of the day, they each had shared their deepest feelings and thoughts, and most importantly, they not only resolved them, but their love and passion were uplifted. And I had a hand in that too, of teaching them how to truly love each other, not just communicate. So it wasn't just, talking head to head, it was talking heart to heart. So that's an example of how, transformations can happen so quickly, and it doesn't have to take months and years to do so.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. We still have a few more minutes left today. Wow. Inspiring. And let me ask, the people that you're helping, right? You are international. You are, by the way, this is our world class, world renowned doctor. And we're excited that she's here because she's helping people, whether you're hurting, whether you're in need of wanting more love, just to up your performance in general. But life is worth it, right? And, there's even like on your website, hold on, I saw it before, an endorsement by Joe Theismann, right, from the NFL. Dr. Mamiko Odegard is a top coach and international best-selling author whose caring love and respect for all is clearly evident. She gives you quick, life-changing insights and proven strategies to become your best self, to gain success, happiness, and love you desire.
It kind of says it all, doesn't it? That's
but I mean, and there's plenty of other people who are talking about, all the work that you've done to help them with your workshops, with your coaching, one-on-one, with your affirmations. Wow. So unfortunately, we have to kind of wrap up, but always love speaking with you.
Well, I love speaking with you, and I just want our audience to know that my new website, actonlove.com, is now live. I'm going to still make a few changes that are on there, but you'll see my phone number on Act on Love. And soon, hopefully by our next podcast, then you'll be able to actually write in or text in your name and phone number, and you can get an automatic response from me so that way we can get connected with each other even quicker. So I care about you. thank you for your time today. And I wish you, and Jill too, especially, love, happiness, and success, because I'm committed to these things for you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you back as always, and we love speaking with you. Thank you again. Again, go to drmamiko.com. That's drmamiko.com for more information. Find her on Facebook, YouTube. She's everywhere, so you could just Google her name or call her at 480-391-1184.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a fantastic day, sweetheart. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
All right.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Let's go inside the mind of a 10-year-old.
I should have worn those earrings today. I like those earrings. Gabby has those awesome earrings. I need to ask her where she got those, but that's just what she would want me to do. I'll have Michaela ask her for me.
Buckle up, Sarah.
Yeah, but then Michaela will be like, why don't you just ask her yourself? That's just like Michaela.
Sarah, buckle up.
Michaela's such a great name. I wish I was called Michaela. There's like a dozen Sarahs in my class.
Hey, we're not hitting the road until you buckle up, honey.
Oh yeah, seatbelt. I forget sometimes because my brain is like busy, you know? I wonder if there's pizza at school today.
Sometimes it can be tough to get through to your kids, but it's not impossible. Always make sure they're wearing their seatbelts, even on short drives. Remember, you have the keys, you have the power. Never give up until they buckle up. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council. Visit safercar.gov/kidsbuckleup for more information.